Mm-hmm.
All right, welcome to our series of webinars presented by the BizSugar Mastermind community. They occur on the second and fourth Wednesday of each month at noon Central. And today I'm going to let Sean Hessinger introduce our special guest, as Sean already knew him and my internet seems a little weird today. So take it away, Sean, introduce our guest.
Okay, well, today we are fortunate to have with us John Bailey. John is the Chief Development and Marketing Officer at Wellspring Digital. He's got 25 years of experience in the digital marketing industry. He has plenty of answers for our members. His expertise ranges from business development and client engagement to content marketing strategies and other forms of marketing. John is a consultant, writer, and speaker. He is board chair of the Frederick County Chamber of Commerce, and he also has been a member of the Tech Frederick Advisory Board. John has been published in Marketing Profs, Spin Sucks, Grow, Social Media Today, and many other sites. He has spoken at the ITE, Marketing Profs, Digital Summit Series, Grant Thornton, and others. He has a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Frostburg State University. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Am I John Frostburg? I don't know how else you pronounce it. So
Frostburg. The bird.
And John and I have known each other since the early days of BizSugar.
Lose you? Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I don't know if we lost Sean or not, but like Sean said, my name is John. I am CDMO, which basically means I do business development and marketing here at Wellspring Digital. We're a full-service digital marketing agency located just outside of Washington, D.C. I have been doing this for 25 years, which is, you can't hear me? Uh-oh.
Yes, I can hear you fine.
You can hear me? Oh, okay. Somebody said Haley said they couldn't hear me. So anyway, I've been doing this for 25 years, which is surprising considering that I'm only 29. So I have been doing this since I was 4 years old. No, I'm just kidding. So today I want to just kind of go over some of what I think, I've project managed small, medium, and large web redesign projects. And I've gathered together some of what I think are important tips and things that people may either overlook or under prioritize. And then from there, I'll open it up and you guys can ask me whatever you want. So I'm going to talk about small business websites and give you some little tips that I think will make a big difference. Let's get started. So first and foremost, ask yourself, are you going to do a website RFP? I don't really, I'm not a huge RFP fan. I prefer for small businesses to engage the web design firm they're going to be working for and have more of a conversation than just blast them with an RFP. But if you do need an RFP, and even if you don't, a solid scope of work document will make a huge difference. So my tips for an effective RFP and or scope of work is have a simple project narrative. Just tell the story of what this website is, who it's for, what you want it to do, what you want to see different from if you have an existing website. Outline straightforward project specs. You don't need to get super technical. Just go over the main points. Do you need a content management system? Do you need e-commerce? And various other elements. Just kind of talk through all of the bells and whistles that this thing must have. I highly recommend that you have agreed upon goals that are also measurable, and that everyone has an idea of what success looks like. If everyone goes in, all the stakeholders, it could just be you, or it could be you and a partner, or it could be you and a board, of directors, whatever. Make sure that everybody agrees on what success looks like, how you're going to get there, and how you're going to track that success. Make sure you have realistic timelines and milestones that you can track, and make sure that you're able to adjust that as needed, because things always happen that can cause delays. And really, seriously, make your timelines realistic. I would say come up with what you think is an appropriate amount of time, and then double that just to be safe. The last thing you want is to say it's going to be done in a month, and then 6 months later you're still tinkering with it. And have a real and realistic budget. Talk to some colleagues, talk to some web design firms, and find out what a real and realistic budget is for this. It's really important to make sure that you spend your money well and spend it wisely, and you're not just doing this because it's cheap, or conversely, you're not just doing it because you feel like you're going to pay extra and get more. Understand what things cost, and I think that'll illuminate the proposals you get in terms of their validity. Specifically with the goals, outline these goals so that everyone is very clear on what success looks like. Is it traffic? Great. How much? And then what do you want that traffic to do? Don't just say we want to double our traffic. Well, that's great. You could double your traffic, but it could be, doubling your traffic with people coming to the website that you don't really want to speak to. So make sure you understand that next step after you've doubled that traffic, or whatever it might look like. Is it conversions? Do you want them to sign up for a newsletter? Do you want them to make a sale? Do you want them to pick up the phone and call you? Do you want them to fill out a form? Outline all of those conversions, and I'll get into a little bit of that in a bit. Is it reach? The geographical reach? Is it reach across different types of audiences? So what is that, and how does that, how is that tracked? Is it users? Again, this could be traffic, but it could also be try to build up a user base for a software system, or try to build up a user base for some sort of organization you're putting together in addition to your business. So what does that look like? And then this is the one: is it brand awareness? I'm not always convinced that brand awareness is what people really want, unless you can clearly define how brand awareness benefits your organization and its bottom line. I would say that that's probably a tangential sort of goal to go after. First and foremost, any successful website is going to focus on the UX, or user experience. If you're not focusing on the user and their experience on the website, then your website's not going to have success, because it's not built for the target audience. So this is a lot of words, and I'm going to read it as if we're in kindergarten anyway, because I do feel like this is very important. My friend Joe Natoli, who is from Give Good UX, which is a great resource for user experience, I asked him if he could to define UX for me, and this is what he said. UX isn't just about users. It's really a value loop in 3 parts. Part 1, the person using the website must perceive that it's valuable to them. That perception must be validated through use. Proof equals trust, which means they use and or purchase. When both things happen, value comes back to the business/creator in increased market share, customer loyalty, money made, or money saved. So you want to help visitors take that first step. You want to guide them through the path. You want to make it easy to use, almost intuitive, second nature. Good UX means good return on investment, happy clients, and better traffic. In order to successfully outline the UX and plan for it, you need to know who your audience is. You want to paint a picture. Whenever possible, Adele Ravella, who I've interviewed a few times from the Buyer Persona Institute says it's infinitely better always to be able to map out buyer personas based on real people. What are their goals? What do they expect to accomplish from your website and from doing business with you? What are their expectations? How do they envision the journey from not knowing who you are to becoming a lifelong client? What are their motivations? What problems do you expect them to solve? How are you going to be a resource, a hero, a trusted advisor to them? And then specifically their behavior. How will they use the website? Are they going to be on mobile? Are they going to be on desktop? Are they going to be on both? Are they going to be busy? Are they going to be at work? Are they going to be at home? Where are they when they're looking at the website, and what is their surrounding? Are they distracted? Are they busy? How are they feeling at that time? I know it seems like I might be saying to go a little deep, but I am, because I feel like you really need to get inside their heads and understand, uh, you know, how they are able to be the best client that they can be of yours, and build a website around that. The UX is only as good as the client journey that you map out. And a website is not necessarily a linear experience. In fact, it's rarely a linear experience. There's going to jump all over the page. And I like the example. If you're my age or somewhere around there, you might remember Choose Your Own Adventure books. Um, it was kind of like the precursor to the internet, where you get to the end of a chapter and then you would say, I'm going to go slay the dragon. And then they'd say, go to chapter 4. And you go to chapter 4. And so your adventure would be determined by the choices that you make. Well, a user is someone who is, coming to your website, and they're choosing their own adventure. They could click anywhere. They could come in from any page from Google. So make sure that no matter where their entry point is, that it's clear to them what you expect them to do next. What are the calls to action? What are the tasks that you want them to perform? And um, what does a repeat visit look like? Are they going to be annoyed by things that maybe talk to them as if they're a brand new user? So you have to kind of weigh those two type of user journeys. And I would say map out as many possible journeys or journey types or sub journeys as you can, without being ridiculous, but just kind of really try to envision what it all looks like. And you can do this with simple flowcharts on a whiteboard. You can certainly map it out with what you see here on the right, which is called a wireframe, which outlines the elements that will be located on. For example, this is a home page. It could be, it could be that you wireframe the homepage and specific landing pages, specific sub pages, that sort of thing. But either way, you should be able to map out, say, when they go to the services page, what are the next possible steps that they may take, and then what do those look like? Is it okay? I'm on the services page. I want to look at this specific service, and then maybe it makes sense to put a case study there, and then on that case study, maybe you redirect them back to some sort of call to action, a form or get in touch or something like that. So really think through it, map it all out, and you'll get more results that way for sure. The other thing you need to think about is how much control you're going to have over your content, who's going to be making that content, where that content's going to live, what that content's going to do. So let's talk a little bit about that. So content planning is, for some crazy reason, seems to be one of the last things that gets addressed when a website is being built. It should be the very first thing you talk about, other than who your audience is and what their user experience should be. You need to determine, use a tool like SEMrush or Ahrefs or Google Analytics to a certain extent, but those two tools they're paid, but they're well worth the money. And try to figure out, what kind of keywords are people using to find you? What kind of keywords are people using to find your competitors? And how can you work those keywords into a sitemap, a site architecture that not only makes sense for the user, but also is keyword rich in an effective way for Google. You also want to inventory all of the content that you have now. If you don't have any content, then or if you have content but you don't have all the content you need to not only create a plan for what content needs to be edited, what content can be reused as is, what content needs to be created, who's going to create it, how long should they have to create that content, and then once you've taken the website live, what's the plan for after that? Because the website is not a one and done deal. You need to have an ongoing content plan. So you need to at least, at a minimum, map out the next 3 to 6 months post launch for your content plan. Content is a website project killer, hands down, the number one usual suspect that can kill a website project. So just don't take it lightly and plan ahead and plan early. Plan all the images and graphics you'll need. Don't rely solely on your design firm to come up with everything, because yes, they're designers and they know what looks good, but you're the one telling the story. So I recommend getting into the mindset that you're sort of the art director or assistant art director or whatever. You may not be the best with images and graphics and video, but you know your story, and so you need to have a say in that. So don't be silent during that piece of it. And then make a plan to implement what I like to call utility content, and I'll talk about that in a second. Content can really make or break a website, so it's important to make sure that you plan out how you're going to create that content and that you're really heavily focused on the quality of that content. I like to, I'm a big advocate for using utility content. Utility content is exactly how it sounds. It's content that your audience can use. If you're creating content that is useful to your audience, they have a reason to come back. Also, if you're creating content that's useful to your audience, Google will recognize that and they will rank you better. So do things like how-to videos, do things like thought-provoking posts that have a different spin, a different angle, a different way of looking at something. That's what they want. They want thought leadership from you. Create tools, references, studies, case studies, different sort of in-depth, maybe longer form content that might really help your audience, understand their problems better from the standpoint that they understand what the problem is and they understand how the solution needs to be implemented. And that's what you're telling them. You're solving their problems with your content, making yourself an indispensable resource and hero to them. And make sure your content is timely and up to date. Whether it be a potential customer or even a potential employee, if they go to your website and the last blog post was published in 2019, they will dismiss you outright as being out of touch, regardless. So have an ongoing content plan and stick to it. You want to be able to keep your website fresh. And like Janet Jackson, it's important that you have control. Miss Jackson, if you're nasty. Sorry, that joke's going to date me for sure. But anyway, you want to make sure that you have a content management system. I like WordPress. There are other things such as headless CMSs, which are growing in popularity. They're more JavaScript based and they're very fast, but they're not as common. So it's harder to find people that can work in that space. There are tools like Wix and Squarespace. They're great for starting out. The problem with those is that you get to a certain point and you can hit a ceiling with those. And unlike a simple WordPress theme where you can continually graduate up, a Wix or Squarespace site, it's a closed system, so you kind of get stuck there. So just keep that in mind for sure. You want to be able to change easily all of the calls to action. You want to be able to change all of the content anywhere on the site. You want to be able to easily change the navigation, keep the site interesting. You don't want to constantly revamp it all the time. You want to keep some stability there, but you want to be able to keep it fresh and keep it interesting, and keep, updating the language in such a way that it is interesting for the, to the audience, and that you're adding great content on a regular basis. Your website is basically nothing more than a container for great content. So it needs to be an attractive container. It needs to be a container that's easy to use, but it also needs to be a container that holds a lot of great content, and that is content that people want to keep coming back for. I also want to talk about Google page experience. So, excuse me, Google has a habit of overcomplicating everything. So I'm going to kind of skip all the typical terminology that they use as much as possible, and really just get to the heart of the matter, which is this. Um, they are heavily focused on what they call core web vitals. What this means is that your website is fast and easy to use. So the website is optimized for speed, which is one of the reasons why these headless CMSs are so popular, because they're lightning fast. But make sure that no matter what you're using, it's optimized for speed as much as possible. This includes images, video, um, you know, other assets within the site that you want to make sure that are completely optimized as much as possible. Um, and you want to have it on a fast hosting platform. I think 9 times out of 10, any issues with a small business website in terms of speed is hosting related, because they're hosting on, some, $5.95 a month hosting platform. It's a shared server and it's super slow. It's not worth it. The discount, it might seem dirt cheap and great, but it's so worth it to pay for some sort of dedicated virtual host that is fast, some sort of business class host. You want to make sure that the site is interactive as quickly as possible, so that they're not sitting there waiting for things to load. So the navigation needs to load quickly. The content needs to load quickly. They need to be able to take action almost immediately, especially on mobile. And you want to make sure that the site has some stabilities. It can be responsive. So, and I'll talk about this in a second. It can shift its look and feel based on the device that it's on, but you don't want it to shift when it's in a fixed window. You don't want things to be moving around, and ads that displace content and that sort of thing, or pop-ups, or other animations and things that sort of shift where the information is, because it's not user friendly, and Google hates that. The other web vitals, other than the core web vitals, are it's got to be mobile friendly. The good news is that the majority of website themes and templates and things out there are all responsive, but you want to make sure of this, and you want to make sure that mobile isn't an afterthought, because it isn't for Google. Google has gone mobile first. Mobile is their primary focus, and so you need to make it your primary focus. Even if the bulk of your audience is going to be using a desktop, you still need to pay attention to mobile, because it does matter, and it'll keep mattering more and more in the future. You want to make sure, obviously, your site's free of viruses and malware. This kind of comes along with having a quality hosting platform that has a strong security setup, and can make sure that you're not on a website server with hundreds of other websites, and the potential of one of those websites getting infected and then infecting your site. You want to keep that as minimal as possible. You want to use HTTPS, or secure socket layer, secure certificate, SSL. It's basically when you see the little lock up in the browser bar. They're super simple to set up. They're super cheap. And Google has stated that this is a ranking factor. And if your site is not running with an HTTPS, is that 2 or 3 T's? Anyway, they will actually label your site in the browser as being not secure. If you're trying to sell something and your site says not secure, that's no good. So make sure you are aware of that and have that set up. No intrusive interstitials. So these are, there's an ongoing debate here. Here's the thing. They do work. So if you have a pop-up that is a form to fill out or something like that, they do work. They do convert, but they're not very user-friendly and people hate them. So really make sure that you absolutely must have it before you decide to implement one. Don't just do it because you can. Do it because there's no other viable option. Again, I can't talk about mobile enough. Mobile is so important. So at a minimum, make sure that you're running with responsive design. And again, what that means is that it's the same website that will have a different what are called breakpoints. So it can have a breakpoint for a phone, a breakpoint for a tablet, a breakpoint for a laptop, a breakpoint for a large screen. It needs to adjust based on the window in which it's being used. And you also want to try to think about your content as responsive content. And what I mean by that is that it's the same content, whether it's on mobile or desktop. In fact, it's important that it's the same content on mobile or desktop. And that's a whole nother conversation, but it should be the same on mobile and desktop, but it should be such that someone can quickly scan the content for important points before they really decide whether they want to dive in and read the whole thing. Finally, just some notes on some on-site optimization. Great content is not enough. You need to have effective page titles that contain keywords, but also make sense to the user. These are still ranking factors. They still matter. So you want to be able to edit your page titles and make sure that your page titles describe what's on the page, but also do it in such a way that it has a keyword in there if possible. Use heading tags with keywords in headings, and this is especially true for blog posts. About every 300 words, you should have a heading, and that's an H1 tag. So if you're in WordPress, you would highlight that text and then choose heading 1 or heading 2. And they should go in succession. So heading 1 is the main heading, then heading 2, and so forth. Optimize your meta description, and you can do this with tools like Yoast SEO, or most content management systems have a way to edit your meta description for each page. These are not technically ranking factors. These are actually more your sales pitch. So Google will use this if it's effectively written when you get listed in the SERP, the search engine results page. This is what they will list as the description of the site. So make sure you write something that's compelling and that encourages somebody to come in and look around. Schema is super, super important. Without getting too technical, basically what schema is that a bunch of developers got together. I'm oversimplifying, but a bunch of developers got together and decided, let's come up with a way to what's called markup a website such that quickly Google can go in and say, okay, here's the schema. And then in the schema, I know what the title is. I know what type of content this is. I know who wrote it. I know how to find out more information about them, and so forth. So there are plugins out there that allow you to do schema markup. If you have the resources, an SEO professional is probably the majority of the time going to do a much stronger job because they have more information and more time spent working on schema markup. But regardless, at a minimum, have the basic amount of schema markup that you can, and do it with a plugin if you have to. Speaking of plugins, make sure that you're only running the plugins that you're using. A lot of, say, WordPress themes come loaded with tons of plugins. It's definitely worth it to engage a developer to go in and disable all the plugins that you're not using, because some of these will actually run whether you're using them or not. They'll load every time a page loads, and then it'll cause your website to slow down tremendously. And as I said before, make sure that you're optimizing your images and video. If you're doing video, try to use something like YouTube and embed the video. There's a site called Responsively. I think it's just embedresponsively.com, where you can take the YouTube snippet and it'll give you a little code snippet to use. You can use Photoshop to optimize your images, or there are free online tools to do that. Regardless of what you do, just make sure that whatever you're putting on the website is as small as possible without a degradation to the point where it can't be good for the user. So I just want to wrap this up with some final thoughts here. Your website is a tool. It needs to be set so that it is always delivering. So, you really want to change your mindset about the website. Don't think of it as a brochure. Don't think of it as, a pitch or just like more marketing speak. It needs to offer value. It needs to be a resource. It needs to be easy to understand. It needs to be actionable. Someone should intuitively be able to go into your website and know where to go, know what you're saying to them, and know what action you want them to take, and be compelled to take that action. You want your website to be shareable. You want your content to be shareable. You want people to view your website as something that they would go, you should go to this website. It's very useful. It's got some great content in there, or it's got some great resources or great tools. Use language people understand. You can use a tool called is it plugin or something called Hemingway. That's a writing tool that can help you strip out all unnecessary language. Leave out all the jargon, all the corporate speak. Leave out all the inside baseball speak. Talk to the user in simple language, from their perspective, from their point of view. Make them the hero of the story. Make them, as they go through your website and as they go through your content, make them feel like you're empowering them to live a better life, be better at their job, whatever it might be. Your website should be so simple and intuitive that they feel like, how did I ever exist without it? Make sure you have no strings attached. You can have gated content. You can ask for things from them, but only do so after you've provided value first, because that's the only way that they're going to give it up. And be authentic. Be yourself. Be real. Don't try to be something you're not. Don't try to be a business you're not. Own your corporate culture. Own your core values, and make sure that comes through in the website. And never, ever, ever, ever forget about the user experience. Always be thinking about the user experience, retesting for the user experience, and making sure that it's dialed in and on point. Because ultimately what you're doing is you're building a circle of trust. There is no trust without action. So create great content they can use. Create, like Joe was saying, a user experience that delivers value, so you get them in that value loop. That value builds trust, and that trust leads to shares, links, following, them shouting about you from the rooftops. So you want to make sure that you're building this circle of trust, this website circle of trust, that you stay in it, that you are encouraging your users to stay in it. You're building community. And finally, your site is super, super important. And I know I've been saying this the whole time, but it's worth repeating. Don't half beep it. It is critical. It is a critical piece of your marketing. infrastructure. It's a critical piece of your sales infrastructure. It's a critical piece of your customer service infrastructure. It's a critical piece of your human resources infrastructure. So don't skimp on anything here. Create a scope of work and agree on the goals. Focus on the user and the user experience. Map it all out. Create those user journeys. Have a content plan and an easy content management system where you can manage that. Focus on Google page experience, because ultimately, if your website's similar to another website and you're neck and neck, that page experience might be what kicks you over the edge. Optimize the site on site. Optimize it on site for better visibility and create that circle of trust that keeps them coming back. I am always watching you. So keep that in mind. I will be checking in and making sure that your website is just perfect. So I don't want to, I didn't want to sit up here and lecture to you all for the whole time. I wanted to leave enough time for any questions that you might have. So that is my prepared remarks. So I wanted to shift it over and get into any questions if there are any, which I believe there are.
John, so the first question we had was asked about mobile first, and I'm going to combine a couple of them together. We have to have mobile first, apparently. Is it possible, though, to design a site that's mobile first without annoying your desktop users?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where responsive design comes in. Yeah, and that's why I say focus on the user experience and not on mobile only, because the user experience could include a desktop user. So while you might focus on mobile first, which basically means that you're building a mobile site and then graduating it out to a larger format. I don't like mobile first because it makes people, I don't like the term mobile first because I think it makes people think that you focus on mobile and little else. I think you need to focus on user first. The only reason I say mobile first is super important is because Google has stated time and time again that they are ranking based on mobile first. And the other reason it's important to focus on mobile first is if your mobile experience is limited compared to your desktop experience, you could be shooting yourself in the foot in terms of potential rankings, because Google's going to go to the mobile version first. And if you have, say, limited usability and limited content on your website, the mobile version compared to the desktop version, that could really hurt how Google sees you and how Google ranks you.
Okay, so we have a bunch of questions. And so one of them is, how do you make sure that you find a developer with the right skill set for your website?
I mean, obviously, you want to check their references. If you can, call. I mean, I would say get on their portfolio and take a look at some of the websites they've posted and give them a call. Give those people a call. But you also, I think you'll find that if you have meaningful and in-depth conversations with a handful of firms, that you'll figure out if there's one that sort of, fits the bill and feels like it's a right match, both culturally and from your needs versus their skills perspective. I mean, the problem is that any web designer can say that they know how to do everything and anything. And we all know that that's simply not true. And you really need to do your due diligence and check the references. And also, the more you have those conversations with them and ask them a lot of very targeted questions, the more you'll get a sense and a feel for, if they're full of it or if they're really up for the task of what it is that you need.
Right. Yeah. So my biggest beef is people who want to write their own checkouts, because in the early days that was a train wreck that rarely worked, but hopefully that's not an issue anymore. So this is a really interesting question. Is it a good idea to break up tasks like UX, coding, etc., and give them to different teams as a way to save money?
Honestly, I would think that you would at some point end up doing the opposite. I think instead of saving money, I think it would end up costing you money, because you have these disparate teams sort of working independently of each other, and might duplicate efforts or might step on each other's toes and cause issues. The more cooks you have in a kitchen, the more the pot could get spoiled. So I am a big fan of picking the right team and sticking with that team as much as possible. Now, you might have, say, a web design and development team that handles the design and development, and then a digital marketing firm that comes in and helps you with the content and the SEO and all those sorts of things, which is fine. But just make sure that everybody's talking early, and that everybody is on the same page, because there's a lot that can go wrong. So I think I answered that question based on what you're looking for, but I don't see it as saving money. I see it as actually costing money, and costing time, and creating a lot of unnecessary headaches.
That's what I would think. So does it make sense to talk with a consultant first before deciding what kind of website you want to have created?
Absolutely, if you can. And it might not have to be a consultant. It might just be that you talk to maybe a partner company, or someone in a similar industry, or even a competitor that you're friendly with. But yeah, I would, I don't necessarily think you need to talk to, go out and engage a digital marketing consultant, or, some sort of content consultant, but it can't hurt. Uh, the more planning you do, the more mapping things out, the better your website will be. So, outside counsel, as long as it's a source that you trust, and a consultant who knows what they're doing, if you can budget for it, and you have the time for it, it's always a benefit. It's always a net positive.
So I'm glad Martin brought this up. Because this is an important topic to me. So how about Gutenberg blocks in the future? That was his whole question. But I'm going to add to that.
Yeah.
I foresee Gutenberg being a problem, because we're going to have half the people, the content creators, half of them are going to use Gutenberg and not know Classic, and half of them are going to only use Classic and hate Gutenberg and refuse to use it. So I can see it becoming a problem with getting your content created and managed. But I think he's probably talking about how will that impact web design.
I hate block editors, and that's just a personal preference of mine. Some people love them. Some people think that they're just the greatest thing since sliced bread. You know, from an editing usability standpoint, it's just all what you're comfortable with. If you're more comfortable with a block editor, then go for it. And basically, the difference is that the classic editor has things locked down in terms of where's the page, the head, the page name, page title is, and then here's a block where you put in all the content and you format it as if you would in like a Word template or something like that. Whereas a block editor is you say, here's the heading block, and then I want to put a video block here, and I want to put a content block here, and I want to put a call to action block here. And from that perspective, people really like it, because you have a lot more flexibility in how you can build out each page. Now you can use things like advanced custom fields, where it's kind of a combination between the two. It's giving you that flexibility of a block editor, but sort of locking it down in more of that classic style, where you're just filling in form fields so that people can't really royally mess something up. But honestly, I think the block editors are really forcing the conversation about the headless CMS. And what a headless CMS it's all JavaScript based, and it's not all locked down into and I'm not a developer, so I'm probably going to just destroy how I talk about this, but it's really simplifying how you're editing your content, and the content management systems are super easy to use, and it's not all sort of locked within these either template or block based systems. So I don't know if WordPress is going away anytime soon. I doubt it will be, because it's just huge. But I think you're going to see more and more people nipping at their heels with better technology. And in my opinion, I think the whole block editor thing has sort of really upset some of the purists, and sort of square-spaced the whole WordPress experience in such a way that not a lot of people are happy with. So that was probably a very political answer to your question, but I think uh, I think at the end of all of this, we're going to see, the Gutenbergs and the Elementors and those sorts of things are going to force the conversation of a better user experience from a content management perspective. So I think there'll be a net positive from it, but it might take a little while. But you're going to keep running into that problem over and over again, Gutenberg versus Classic, and who's, because then you have Drupal, and Drupal's like a completely different way of editing as well. And some people love it and some people hate it. So you just have to have that conversation internally and figure out what makes the most sense for you. So I don't know if that helped at all, but
Well, Drupal hasn't been a problem. I honestly don't know. I may know somebody that knows how to put content into Drupal, but I don't know that I know anyone, and I know most all the writers there are. So writers like me tend to create the content and then decide where the images and the videos go, which is a mess in Gutenberg. I just consider it a nightmare personally. In fact, I wrote about it for Small Business Trends early on. But they split, basically WordPress split the community in half. Yep. And now but my fear is WordPress may later try to force everyone into Gutenberg by getting rid of the Classic Editor plugin, which then people either have to move to Classic Press or something else, and WordPress will lose market share. So that seems like an incredibly crazy decision they made. But the other question is, how does it affect SEO and rankings to be on headless is faster? WordPress has more options, more plugins, more capability you can stick in there easily. And Gutenberg, I don't know how Gutenberg affects SEO, honestly. Haven't heard anything.
Well, I don't know if it does necessarily. It might if it's loading too much bloat in the code, and it always boils down to how bloated is the code. And the Classic Editor tends to create cleaner code, at least in my opinion. And when you have cleaner, less bloated code, it's a faster website. It's a more inherently crawlable website, and it will rank better. So, but I don't know if it has as much of an effect on it, because Classic Editor, there's still things in there that can cause code bloat. So, you have to really make sure that you're not designing yourself into a corner such that you're so reliant on all these extra tools and things in these editors to make a layout that really only pleases maybe you or your team, in the sense of it looks a very specific way. But that's not what matters. What matters is it pleasing for the user to use? Does the look and feel help the user achieve their goals? So I would design from that standpoint and code from that standpoint, and the rest will sort of come out in the wash, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And there's another reason why Gutenberg was a very odd decision. All right, so moving on. Martin also asked about, do you have an opinion on flywheel hosting?
I honestly, I saw this question. I don't know what flywheel hosting is, so I apologize about that. So no, I don't. I don't know what it is.
Of them. Yeah, I haven't heard of them either. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of hosting companies, and you can't
Is
know
it a
all
company?
of them. But that's not. I assume it's a hosting company.
Yeah, I mean,
You may clarify that in the comments.
if you have a WordPress site, you can't go wrong with WP Engine. It's a great hosting platform. It's more expensive, but man, it's so worth it. Because the downside of having a cheap and slow host is that you don't rank at all. Plus, you have a terrible user experience. So it's just not gonna. It's not worth the savings. So I love WP Engine. There's another one. I think it's called Kinsta. We have a cloud hosting platform that we use called Sailfish, which is very similar to WP Engine. But I would just make sure that it's always, it's a business class host. It's very secure. It's very fast. They can show that it's fast. They can show that it's secure, and they can show that it's backed up on a regular basis.
Okay. Right. There's another big one besides WP Engine, but the name escapes me right now. All right. So the next question is, if you have no web design experience, how do you make sure that your designer isn't limiting your vision based on the tools they prefer to use?
That's a tough one because, designers are full of excuses, and I've worked with a ton of them, and I've worked with some really, really great ones. And you have to ask them for something 3 or 4 times sometimes before they'll finally let down their guard and say, actually, yeah, we can do it that way. So I'm probably going to upset some designers by saying this, but, stick to your guns. Just about anything's possible on the web. It's just a matter of time, expertise, and money. So if something is super, super important to you, first and foremost, make sure that it's that vision is clear to the designer. The worst thing you can tell a designer is I'll know what I like when I see it. That is completely counterproductive thing to say to a designer. What you want to say is, I like this site, I like this site, I like this feature, I like this feature, I like these colors, I like this layout, I like this user experience. As long as you can outline your vision clearly and succinctly, that any designer should be able to take that vision and do a reasonable translation of that into an actual design. But you're going to be limited by budget. Ergo, can you afford a really, really good designer who can do all the different things that you want to do? Or are you going to have to go with, your neighbor's kid who does it on the weekends in, the basement and, get what you pay for. So just all I can answer to that question is just make sure that you outline every aspect of what you want out of this website before you engage with a designer.
Right. Well, the main question comes down to, I believe, are you going to do a regular content site, or will WordPress work for you? And it works for a lot of businesses. And then the alternative is, are you going to build a giant e-commerce site? If yes, choose a really good e-commerce platform like Shopify, and if you have a WordPress site and you just want to add e-commerce, use WooCommerce. There's 2 things to watch for in WordPress developers. And one is the guy that thinks he's a programmer, but he's not. And so he tries to cobble together a bunch of stuff that doesn't work together, and he doesn't know how to code it. And the other guy who, won't use any theme or anything that's already built. He wants to build everything from scratch. And there's advantages to that if they're really good, but it's expensive and unnecessary for most stuff. And so those are things to think about.
Even the ones that are building something from scratch are using some sort of base theme anyway. I owned I was a partner at a company for 17 years, and the majority of the websites that we built, or they're still building, are from scratch, and they're phenomenal websites. They're amazing websites, and they are all built from scratch. But I agree. I think you can, you can pay $20,000 for a website that you could have paid $5,000 for and got the same results. So you just need to prioritize your goals.
There's some things you really need a custom site for. I can think of a couple unique e-commerce cases for that, but most of the time you don't need to do that. And like I said, if they try to build a shopping cart from scratch and people can't check out, and you don't know that they can't check out, it really is a limiting factor. It was a really big problem before everyone tended to now use shopping carts that already exist, which I highly recommend doing.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is that when you you know, and I've seen this so many times where a company or an organization, especially a nonprofit or a large government agency, will come in and it says it has to work this way. So we can't have off the shelf. And, you know, if it does 95% of what you needed to do, and it's that last 5%, how important is that last 5%? Is it so important that you're going to spend $100,000 to engage a development team over, 12 to 18 months to build this completely custom backend system? Or can you use something off the shelf and customize it just enough to fit your needs? Most small businesses can't afford to build something completely from scratch or completely customize some, e-commerce system. So be willing to, compromise. And I think if you always ask the question, is it good for the user? Ultimately you'll make the right decision.
All right, so this is a good question too, because I think legally it's already required, but mostly nobody's doing it. Not many people are doing it yet. Will accessibility be an important issue in the future? Martin asked about that.
Yeah, I think it will be, and I think it already is. If you're not focused on accessibility, you're think of it this way. Every update that Google has come out with that hasn't been explicitly anti-spam has been about usability. And ultimately, usability and accessibility, it can be argued that they are one and the same. Accessibility is super important because you don't want to, leave anyone out. Um, Not only is it immoral and not fair, it's bad business practice. So, yeah, I think accessibility is going to continue to be a hugely important issue. That said, the technology out there is making it such that you can have both of the best of both worlds. You can have a site that is, accessible to all people wanting to use it, while still, achieving the majority of your goals. And I think we'll continue to see that in the future. So I don't think we're going to have to revert in any major way in the future. But I think a tool like a headless CMS is great because it's creating these super, super fast websites that are easy to use. And ultimately, that is part of accessibility. But yeah, I mean, I've worked with government entities and nonprofits, and accessibility has always been a major factor. But here's the thing: the baseline, what is it, WC3 or W3C or whatever it is, the baseline accessibility guidelines. If you read through that, it's just a good website. It's just a good, easy to use website. So you're not having to completely limit all of what you want to do in order to achieve a reasonable level of accessibility. So yeah, I think it's going to continue to be hugely important, but I don't think that that's any sort of negative towards the web design industry or the web in general. I think it's a huge positive.
Some of it's fairly simple things like the font size,
Yeah.
the contrast of colors.
Yeah.
So it's good design practice anyway. I think over time developers will become more familiar, but right now there's the big debate going on between the people that manually improve accessibility on websites as a service and the plugins that provide some tools that lay over the top of it. to help people with accessibility. One thing I want everyone to be aware of is mobile responsive is really great for older people with vision issues. We use control scroll to make it bigger all the time. So think about that when you're designing, because when I control scroll and now I can't read the content because it's only ads I can see on the page, that could be a problem.
And again, it goes back to core web vitals and page experience and user experience, and all that stuff adds up, and accessibility is a huge part of that. I mean, in my opinion, I didn't really focus on it because to me, it's kind of the baseline of what a website should be. It should be accessible to all, all who want to use it.
Well, Haley has something related to that. She said she thought all business hosting platforms already have all these core web vitals built into them.
Not necessarily. Certain elements of core web vitals, are hosting related in terms of like speed, but the design and coding of the website can dramatically, affect the core web vitals. So no, not necessarily. And you can test. There are core web vitals utilities out there from Google where they'll tell you, how your site scores and where you have issues, and go to any site and plug it in, and I even some of the biggest sites out there, and I think you'll see that they have issues. So no, I would definitely not assume that your hosting company is just going to automatically make sure that that your website has quality core web vitals. But talk to your developer about it.
I just wanted to throw this out here. Yeah, when we're talking about HTTPS, I think the biggest drawback to not having it is those scary warnings that the browsers put on your site.
Yeah.
If you go to your site and you get this full page thing that says, "Warning, this site is unsafe. Do you want to take the risk?" I don't think most people would click "I'll take the risk" to go to your site. So I think if you don't have HTTPS today, probably most people that land on your site aren't going to click to your site because of those scary warnings that the browsers are putting up there.
I'm still shocked by sites that don't have it. It's so easy to set up. And yes, some hosting companies will insist that you have HTTPS. So they'll make it automatic for you, which I think is great. But sometimes they don't. So don't automatically assume that they will, and that's only one small piece of the whole page experience and core web vitals thing.
I think it's partly a hosting thing too. Some hosting companies make it free and easy, and some hosting companies make it difficult and pricier. And so it depends on your hosting company. And if you have one that is making it difficult or costly, then you might want to consider a different hosting company. Martin said, apparently when we were discussing something, he said embed responsible with the tool.
It's embed responsibly. And I believe it's embedresponsibly.com. And it's just a free little utility. And what it does is it makes sure that because what YouTube provides isn't always going to render properly. And it isn't always going to play nice with your responsive code. So it just gives it a little div that makes it sort of size very well with the site as you use it on different devices. So it's just a neat little free little utility, embedresponsibly.com, I believe.
Okay, great. So I'm trying to decide whether to skip to Haley's question or ask about overseas developers first. Do you have time to stay late? We got lots of questions or a few more. Okay,
I'm
super.
good.
All right. So first is, what do you think about using overseas developers?
Sometimes it's a necessary evil, and I say that it's an evil not to slight, developers who are overseas, because there are some very talented overseas developers, and I've worked with a few. The problem is that you have a time difference. Generally, you have a cultural sort of difference in how you work versus how they work. Not saying one's better than the other, but there is going to be a difference there, and there's obviously there's the language barrier. So if you plan on using overseas developers, don't go into it thinking, oh man, we're going to save all this money, it's going to be great, we're only going to pay a fraction of the cost, because at the end of the day, you might pay less, but it's going to take a lot more of your time, because you really have to outline everything to the letter, and there's a lot of back and forth, especially if you're using developers in, say, Ukraine or India or somewhere where the time difference is almost a day. You have to factor in that you ask them a question, 12 hours later you get an answer. It's probably not going to be the answer you're looking for, or it might, that answer might cause you to have 5 more questions, and then you're just in this loop. So use them at your own peril. Plan on, if you do use overseas developers, for it to take longer and take a lot more of your time and energy in mapping things out, and clearly outlining what it is that you want them to do.
It's it's a really big problem in communication sometimes. Sometimes it's not, if their English is very good, but English as spoken and written in India is different than English here, and different than English in the UK. And keep that in mind if they're going to do any of the content. A lot of people want to save money on content by having someone write it that's in, say, India. But then you have to go and edit it all, because it's in Indian English, which is not American English or UK English or Australian English.
That's why I say it's also important to factor in the cultural differences, because it's not always just a language thing. You could have the best English speaking person out of India or Pakistan or wherever. They speak perfect English, but they might understand something to mean something completely different than what you're trying to tell to them. So it's not always just a matter of whether or not they speak good English. It's a matter of do they actually understand what it is that you're trying to tell them to do. So that's why I say sometimes you got to say it like 3, 4, 5 times.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And people may not realize it. I worked with a British writer for a while, and I found that there was an amazing amount of language words that they used that were not translated. Like I didn't know what they were. I had to go look up what they meant. And I don't think a lot of Americans are aware of that unless they travel a lot internationally. How many words there actually are that are totally different in another country that speaks the same English you do, in Australia or in England. I have a friend that was
my boss is from Manchester, and I will be on Teams sometimes, and I'll just reply to him, I have zero idea what it is you just said. Because I don't. I'm like, I know what you mean.
That's what I'm saying. People don't know. A friend of mine from Australia carried books up 3 flights of stairs at a fancy hotel, because when she asked, there was no bellhop or whatever on duty, because she got there really late, and she asked where the lift was, and they told her there wasn't one. And so you have to keep that in mind. If you need English, it's best to have a writer in the country you want the English for.
There's all kinds of goofy stuff.
Just easier and cheaper. All right, so Haley has a question. Trying to figure out what accessibility, safety, sustainable design gaps I need to make sure I have set up before launching my future website. And she's thinking about doing it on GoDaddy's platform. They have their own unique thing, I think. Can I change the back-end coding myself? Are there any plugins that you recommend using as an owner of a GoDaddy website? I kind of think most serious people don't use GoDaddy websites, and I don't think that you'll know, because those are kind of do-it-yourselfers, right?
I mean, we usually come in after the fact, after that's gone horribly wrong. GoDaddy serves a purpose. It's cheap. It's relatively easy to use, but the support is horrible. The system isn't always intuitive and easy to use in terms of making something more custom than what they're trying to. I mean, it's a plug and play tool that's cheap. So, you get what you pay for. And plus you're on GoDaddy, and GoDaddy, they're going to throw you on a server with 150 other sites. And of those 150 other sites, there could be a site that is a memory hog or a traffic hog or is, just wide open and ends up being a security nightmare. And then your site gets hacked. So that's why I say, if you can avoid it, just spend the extra money and go, use a site like WP Engine or Kinsta or those sorts of resources. Or honestly, I would recommend Squarespace over even if GoDaddy's using a WordPress platform, I would recommend Squarespace over GoDaddy. I mean, I hate to bash people. GoDaddy just bought who did they buy? They bought somebody. Oh no, they bought it. I was thinking of something else. Never mind.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Haley, I turned on your ability to talk so you can explain why you want to use GoDaddy.
No, I'm glad you're saying this because I still need to do some more research on support. So I'm happy that you said that.
The words GoDaddy and support or GoDaddy and good support are rarely ever said in the same sentence.
No, that's good to know. Can you spell out the other recommendations? You're recommending Squarespace and W.
I'm not necessarily recommending Squarespace. I am recommending as a hosting platform, WP, P as in Paul, engine as in like engine of a car.
Okay.
WPengine.com.
So let's ask her, Haley, what kind of site are you building? What's the purpose, the primary purpose of the site? Is it like to sell services or to sell products or for content?
Sell product primarily. I'm still in the development phase of that, but it's not completely launched yet, and I haven't done any sort of beta testing, but I thought that would be really important.
I'm going to throw an idea out, and then John can tell you if I'm right. WordPress with WooCommerce. That's the way to go.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. WordPress with WooCommerce is always going to be your best bet. Unfortunately, you're going to need somebody to probably help you with it unless you have, the ability to design or develop. There's some great themes out there on like Theme Forest and other theme sites that you can buy for like, a couple $100. And they're WooCommerce themes. So they already come with all of the, bells and whistles you need. And then you just need to go in and sort of customize the layout. But yeah, I don't like Shopify because Shopify is a standalone service, generally speaking. And it's kind of locked down. It's kind of like the Squarespace of e-commerce. And so we don't like it because we can't get in there and sort of monkey around with the code enough to optimize it for SEO. So whereas WordPress and WooCommerce are they're open source platforms and just great tools. But it can be a little frustrating if you don't know what you're doing and you don't have any support. So
yeah, I always thought there was a lot of plugin issues with WordPress and just the complexity over time. Navigating the.
Well, the problem is you're right. No, there are a lot of plugin issues with WordPress, and the plugin issue with WordPress is that most WordPress themes come with too many plugins. So that's why I say you really need to, you don't have to have all the plugins that they come loaded with. So you're spending a lot of your time sort of stripping a bunch of junk out, and that's why it's a good idea to have a developer resource who can come in and take a look and see, which plugins might be causing issues. And WordPress websites do take, some more maintenance on your end because it's not a closed system. Squarespace system is closed. And so they're just going to automatically update it and it's all locked down. So there are some benefits to that. But, I think if you're looking at the long term, you're better off with the WordPress site, in my opinion.
Right. Hey, we have inside the BizSugar Mastermind, there are individual groups, and there's one for web design, a web design group under groups, and there's a web developer. If you'll go in there and join those groups, I'll be happy to answer your questions, give you resources, point you in the right direction. I had to say, I think GoDaddy would definitely be the wrong direction. In fact, I have never since 1994 being online, ever heard anyone recommend hosting with GoDaddy, of anything. And so that would be the last.
That drag car racer lady. She recommended it, but she got paid millions of dollars to recommend it. So
yeah,
you got to look at the motivations.
Right. Well, that was helpful.
So,
I mean,
yes.
I feel like you kind of have to go down a couple different rabbit holes and get feedback before.
Unfortunately, it's
investing more money into things. So that's good to know.
A pain, so yeah.
Are you just to spell out WooCommerce? Is it WOO or WU as an utility?
WOO.
Okay.
I'll email you some resources on that.
Okay.
It's a plugin. Basically, it's one of those problematic plugins. No, it's a really good plugin that it's very popular, lots of users. What we really need is a great developer to figure out which themes don't have a bunch of bloat in them, so we pick the right theme in the first place. That would really help the the DIY.
You can pick a theme that's loaded with plugins as long as you have somebody that can come in and kind of clean it up.
Oh, now why would we take a theme and then need to pay a developer to fix the theme? What we need is a theme we don't need to have a developer.
You might not have a better choice.
Oh, well, that could be. All right, so moving on. Martin said, thanks for the answer. I am a contrarian, so I like your style. My webmaker has talked about headless CMS. I'm writing a blog post in Drupal, but it looked a bit old. I'm not a techie. You're writing in Drupal? No kidding. That's rare.
Drupal. But I'm not a developer. Some developers love it. They think it's the best thing in the world. Yeah, to each their own. I think you're hard pressed to find something better than WordPress right now. As far as like the overall choice, but I hope that changes because I hate seeing something, be the only option for people. And that's why I'm excited about the headless CMS. I think it's gonna be interesting to see how that all plays out.
We have Classic Press. I'm going to give them a plug. If we're using WordPress Classic Editor, we really all need to move to Classic Press, which I planned to do a long time ago, but my developer is missing, so I haven't been able to get a hold of him, or I would have moved to Classic Press already, which is a fork of WordPress for anybody that doesn't know, that permanently stayed with Classic instead of going to Gutenberg.
It's like the Lutherans when they split from the Catholics.
Yeah, kind of like that. So Fizzle, I don't know what Fizzle is. So Martin said, maybe I should turn it on. So Martin said that WP Engine acquired Studio Press. Flywheel is a professional hosting like WP Engine.
Yeah.
Flywheel is another managed WordPress hosting option. It's at getflywheel.com. So apparently they're a direct competitor to WP Engine, and the other one I can't think of.
Yeah, I mean, if they're quality like WP Engine, then yeah, definitely, great. I'll have to check them out.
Man, the other one you'd think it'd be more visible. DreamHost, that's the one I was trying to think of. The other hosting company that's just specifically what WordPress is DreamHost. Okay. I've talked with blind people. Okay, so Martin said he's talked with blind people about this issue on Clubhouse. I will use WP Engine Studio Press monochrome theme because it's accessible already.
Cool. Yeah,
and
I mean,
so that's a good idea. So
yeah, it sounds like
it's
a great
W3
idea.
I think it's W3 W3.org, Martin.
I think it's WC3.org.
It's W3C, but
W3C,
the domain, the URL is just W3.org.
Okay,
which
and that's
is why
the
we get
accessibility.
confused.
And the thing is you have to be careful there because there's different levels. to be considered, as far as I remember, for government agencies, they usually only have to hit the baseline level of accessibility, which is not hard to do. It's ultimately just a good website that functions well for others.
Can you specify what what was the terminology you used?
Utility scoring, is that the one you're going to ask about? You asked about utility scoring URL recommendation.
I don't really know. Did I say that? I don't know what that means. Utility.
One of your slides was talking about utility. Early on, we're talking about the utility like
content.
how to, utility content. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's just what I mean by like utility content is there's a bad echo for some reason. Utility content is just content that's of value, that's useful for somebody. So it's not just content for content's sake. It's not just content for sales or marketing's sake. It's content that actually serves a value. Ann Handley has one of the best quotes. I asked her, she wrote a book called Content Rules, which is years old, but it's still relevant. And I asked her if she could sum up her book in one sentence. She said, make all of your marketing relentlessly client focused. You want your customers to thank you for marketing to them. And so that's what I mean by utility content. Everything should have value. Even your sales stuff should have some value to the user. So that's what I mean by utility content.
Right. The last question was, Haley asked, how do you go about getting an SSL if you don't have it already?
You know, I saw this question and I've been racking my brain trying to remember. There's so many services out there. Namecheap, there it is. Namecheap is a domain service that also sells SSL services. That's a great service, easy to use. Your hosting company should be able to set you up with SSL, especially if there's someone like, you know, the Flywheel or WP Engine or something like that. They should be able to set you up automatically with an SSL. So I would start there. If they can't do it, then you can check out something like Namecheap.
I'll send you that URL too, Haley. I'll email them to you. And if you join our groups, we can talk there. Yeah, Namecheap is my domain registrar of choice. But I want to throw in one more tip. I don't know if you'll agree with it or not. I seriously believe you should never register your domain the same place you host your website.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. It depends. I mean, you know, it depends on what you're worried about, you know, because if you have a great hosting company, yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if it's a good hosting company and you know you're satisfied with them. I mean, it's just paying for another service. I don't know what could necessarily go horribly wrong. It's not as if they're hosting the domains on the same server as your website, you know. So I don't know. I could go either way on that.
My reasoning, the reason I say that is that way, if you have an issue with your hosting company, you still control your domain. And
you
if
should
you have
definitely control your domain.
You still control your hosting. They're separated so that if an issue comes up, you can recover. It's easier to recover.
I mean, you should control your domain account. Totally.
Absolutely.
Don't trust your domain to, you know, people want us to register their domains and host their domains for them, and they don't want to deal with it, and that's fine. But I usually recommend, you know, get your domain and have it auto renewed and have it be under your lock and key. You know, yeah, I agree with that. Definitely. I think Gail's going around upsetting hosting companies. I think that's what's going on there. She's picking fights with hosting
That
companies.
could be. You never know. All right. So that covers all the questions that we had. Thank you to our regulars and some other guests that joined us today. And I want to let you know, you probably noticed that on the screen is how to reach John. And if someone wants to hire you, what's the best way to reach you? Facebook or your website or your phone number?
Yes. Usually website's the best, but you can email me. Email me directly is the fastest. Email me at john@wellspringdigital.com.
the email goes to spam like mine did. Then use the
There's
phone
that,
number.
Yeah,
if you
yeah
don't
then use
get
the
an
phone
answer.
number. Yeah. Good point.
All right. So you guys know how to reach John. This video replay will be available on the BizSugar YouTube channel, and it will be put into the blog post where you found the original event. I want to mention that on the blog, there is a tab that says webinars. It's at blog.bizsugar.com/webinars. You can see all of our past and future events on that page. It makes it real easy to get to all the replays and know what's coming up. We do these webinars on the second and fourth Wednesday of every month at noon Central. And in November, we're planning a really big event. So stay tuned and check out that page because it's going to be very special and all about how to make money. So it's about social selling. It's about e-commerce. And we're going to have people come in that have actually learned how to do it from a particular way that it's taught and share their experience, how they got started, what was hard, what was easy, how they're doing now. So it'll be a great event. That'll be November 10th. And so we invite you all to come. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, John, for the great presentation and staying late to answer all the questions.
You do it.
Thank you, John and Gail.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.